afternoon, everybody. My name is Denitha Bro, and I'm the Deputy Registrar at the college. I would like to thank you for joining us for this educational session, a journey of the process of adoption reunions led by Leslie Wagner. Before I introduce our speaker for today's session, I would first like to go over a few housekeeping items. As part of our ongoing efforts to leverage technology to increase accessibility, all parts of AMED, including this educational session, will have live captions. To turn on the captions, click the Show Captions button below to view our live captions in either English or French. If you require assistance at any point during this year's AMED, there is also a live support desk found on the bottom left corner of your screen. You can click on the pink chat bubble and you'll be connected with live support should you require any assistance. Following this year's AMED, we invite you to complete a post-event feedback form to share your experience of this year's two-day virtual event. The feedback form will be sent to you via email after the two-day event, so please be on the lookout for that. Your feedback is important to us and will assist us in planning next year's event. Once you complete the feedback form, you will have access to a link to the certificate of participation, which you can fill out and print for your records. Your attendance at AMED, including participation in this session, can count towards the completion of your continuing competence program, also known as CCP. As a reminder, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of Leslie's presentation. Members can submit their questions through the chat feature to the right of the screen on the virtual portal. I will be reading the questions aloud for Leslie to respond. We will do our best to answer as many questions as time permits. If there are questions left unanswered, Leslie will be logging into the virtual portal to review questions and connect with attendees. In order to accommodate questions for as many members as possible, we would ask you to limit yourself to one question only. Now, let's begin this educational session. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Leslie Wagner. Leslie is a registered social worker, born and raised in Toronto and graduate from George Brown College in 2004 on the honor roll. She was the sole recipient of the Life Skills Coaching Award after undertaking a 4-year training program at Gestalt Institute of Toronto to obtain certification as Gestalt psychotherapist, which she completed in 2010. In 1999, Leslie had been actively involved within the adoption community, supporting adults separated by adoption to help heal their loss and grief and engage in their search, reunion, and post-reunion process. Leslie has been involved in a number of noteworthy activities, which includes being a speaker at standing committee hearing for Bill 77 and Bill 183, now known as the Open Adoption Record within Ontario. She was also a participant at the stakeholder meeting with the Adoption Information Disclosure Act. Leslie has presented at numerous other conferences, including facilitating a workshop at the International Adoption Conference in New York City in 2008, and then as the keynote speaker in 2010. She has also presented at the Children's Aid Society and Jewish Family Services. In Leslie's presentation, she will note that nature and nurture are equally essential aspects in understanding who we are. Predominantly through musings from the field and Leslie's own experience, this educational session will touch on the history of adoption and briefly explore the post-reunion process of mothers and their now adult children separated by adoption. Leslie's presentation will explore how we, as social advocates, can learn from the history of past practices, which at best misinformed, misguided, and had a sole intention of persuading young single-parent pregnant women and girls to surrender their children to adoption under the guise of being the loving choice and in the best interest of the child. It has been 100 years since the inception of adoption in Ontario. Yes, change in society and practice has occurred. Leslie's session will walk us through the creation of an empathetic and respectful approach of support and integrity, which means being willing to welcome unfamiliar truths and acknowledge the diversity of beliefs and feelings of loss and grief from those with a direct experience. Please join me in welcoming Leslie Wagner. Leslie?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Says host disabled participant screen share.
You're able to share? Or just,
Should I hit it again?
let's see. Do you see it? Are you able to share screen?
I see it.
It's the green button.
Yeah. Okay, I think we are ready. Hi, everybody. Presenting to my colleagues and peers today is a real honor. I just want to first say that. But as I was preparing this, it was really more challenging than I had experienced before. And I was curious about this and wanted to see what was coming up for myself. So it was early in the year, and I was feeling some guilt because of the aspects of adoption that I'm presenting have a foundation in grief and loss, the original separation of mother and child. And then moving to the hurdles and triumphs of reunion when both parties agree to this, of course. Okay, why is the trying to change my slide? Here we go. Thank you. Sorry about this rough introduction. So anyway, I was thinking about why is this so hard for me? And I thought, am I compounding the impact of COVID by speaking about the turmoil, emotional turmoil within adoption that rarely has a light shone onto it? And then I quickly realized that I was caretaking the audience and taking away what I believe is an essential message and equally important, the audience's ability to support themselves and even come up against another perspective or experience and to take what they will from this. So it reminded me of a time when I was going to the International Adoption Conference and I was leaving my daughter with my parents for the weekend. Now what happened, she was fine on Friday. Saturday she woke up, she's got the chicken pox. So they decided not to tell me for some reason. So I was really angry about this when I returned. And I thought, well, why didn't they tell me? And I knew from their perspective that they were trying to protect me from worrying or feeling anxious because I had a job to do. But from my perspective, I thought, well, how must my daughter feel? She was only 7, about not being allowed to tell her mommy what was going on. And then I thought, do my parents even know me? Did they believe I wasn't strong enough to be able to present at the conference? Or that I wouldn't be able to function somehow? I would be concerned, of course, a normal response, but unable to function? No. So they'd put their own assumptions about what they believed I needed above the needs of my daughter, who just wanted to tell me. So that memory allowed me to sort of push past my concern and trust that the audience to feel and think as they will, right? So adoption practices were based on religious beliefs and social stigma of the times towards young girls who weren't married when they became pregnant. It's what's termed the baby scoop era. And in Canada, that was between 1945 and 1988. Unmarried pregnant girls between 15 and 19 were actually targeted because they were unmarried, pregnant, and between the ages of 15 and 19. Now, some professionals of the era considered that the punishment of the mother for her transgression was an important part of the process. Now, Dr. Marion Hilliard of Women's College Hospital was quoted in 1956, I know, a long time ago. Here's what she said: "The father plays absolutely no part in this. That is part of her rehabilitation. When she renounces her child for its own good, the unwed mother has learned a lot. She has learned an important human value. She has learned to pay the price of her misdemeanor, and this alone, if punishment is required, is punishment enough. We must go back to a primary set of values and discipline that starts with the very small child." I think they've got a school named after her in Scarborough. So I just found that like, wow, okay. I would also be negligent if I didn't mention the 60s scoop. From the 60s, of course, well into the 80s, where young Indigenous First Nations children were also taken from their families and their tribes to be assimilated into white culture through adoption and foster care. And may we also never forget the residential schools as well as Canada's own genocide. Whew. Okay, let's face it. The professionals believed that babies were blank slates and they simply could be raised by anyone without adverse consequences. We now know that the consequences for the baby are real and can impact them for their entire lives, right? Adoptees are overrepresented by at least twice as much in the criminal justice system and also regarding mental health diagnosis. And since they represent less than 5% of the population, it's concerning. One of the earliest practices by social workers was advising the adoptive parents that they should never tell the children they were adopted. The belief was if they didn't know, there simply wouldn't be an issue. A horrendous idea, I believe, at any time, as most of us know what secrets and lies do, and that the truth eventually does come out. Again, we now know that the baby does experience the loss of their mother, even without physical memory. It's visceral. My workshop partner and colleague, who's an adoptee, was from that era and only discovered he was adopted after his adoptive parents had passed away and he found his adoption order. He was in his early 40s. And we have a term for this. It's called a late discovery adoptee. It took him about a decade. He worked diligently through what all this meant to him. He found and reunited with his mother, which was a huge part of his healing and hers too. And he reclaimed his original surname. In later decades, like the 70s and into the 80s, adoption practices shifted slightly from condemnation and the like to being under the guise of caretaking, or adoption being the loving choice for your baby. Young mothers were often confronted by social workers, doctors, etc., with the phrase, if you love your baby, you'll do what's in the best interest of the baby. I know this firsthand as it was used on me. Yes, I am one of these mothers. I gave birth to my son 2 months before my 18th birthday. And though I was still in a relationship with his father, who was 21, I was young, unwed, and financially insecure. This is the day we separated, and I surrendered my son a week before his first birthday. Sad there. This is our reunion. We've been reunited now for 18 years, and we've got 3 beautiful grandchildren. It's fantastic. So my primary intention in speaking today is to sort of spark compassion and understanding for those separated by adoption, especially adoptees. It's critical for us to now recognize the impact of this social experiment on them, so we can validate their feelings and provide support for their healing. I also have the intention to challenge beliefs, biases, and myths about adoption. For example, a common belief is that every adoption saves children who are being abused, neglected, or unwanted, and that they find loving homes. And isn't that wonderful? It's also false. What is true is that for any adoption to occur, there first must be loss, the separation of mother and child. And this is not in the best interest of the child and does have consequences we must understand and accept in order to best serve the need of the adoptee. I want to be clear from the beginning, I'm speaking about young girls and women who never abused or neglected their babies or children, as most were taken from them right after birth. They lost their children to adoption because they were young, unwed, and financially unstable at that time. Other mitigating reasons were the girls' parents' beliefs, either religious, what will the neighbors think, or you're not coming home with the baby, that's their grandchild. Many girls were sent to unwed mothers' homes, provincial facilities, where the only choice was adoption. Others, like myself, had constant pressure from doctors, social workers, and other professionals who I sought out for support in being a young single mother. These are the mothers and the children that I'm focused on today. The question I pose on the slide is one I ask you to consider, as it's based on beliefs some social workers may have and bring to their work. Should being young, unwed, and not financially stable still be justified reason to separate mother and child? Some may think so, I remain hopeful that all of us will embrace diversity and change in society and practice. To me, this means fully being compassionate, bringing empathy and love to those we serve. I actually became a social service worker because of the negative experiences I encountered, not only when I was young, but also into my search and reunion process. Not all were negative, but more were than weren't. And I did have one really good social worker who supported me through that process. And I thought, I want to be like her. And it seemed the profession needed more professionals like her, empowering people and helping them by listening to their needs and having them identify what is best for them. Sorry. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. I've not seen those teen mom shows, and there's no judgment. I am one of them. I'm just from a different era. I need to consider it a bit more to know what messages these shows are portraying. But part of me is a little bit jealous of them, not because they're on TV, because maybe the times have seemingly changed to be more compassionate and understanding, or because I've not watched, maybe they're still being judged or criticized for their situations, and people have simply found yet another way to monetize young girls and their babies. I don't know. I need more research and insight. But look, even back in 1982, when I was pregnant with my son, I never felt shame for having a baby out of wedlock or for being young. I knew even then that babies have been coming into the world this way since the beginning of people. And some might think, okay, maybe that's mature, realistic, confident in self, whatever. Yes, but also I was very naive because this wasn't how society perceived me then, during my search and reunion process, or even now. So the so-called professionals brought all their biases and righteousness into all of our communications, things I didn't believe or felt were right for me. The financial aspect is what scared me, though, and was one of the main reasons I surrendered my son to adoption, but it wasn't the only one. Also, the constant praise being said to me by the social workers. If you love your son, you'll do what's in his best interest, which meant adoption to them. Of course, I loved him. The moment I first held him, I experienced what I call newfound love. It's different from any relationship I had with family, friends, boyfriends. Did that mean that if I didn't place him, I was being selfish? I always knew adoption wasn't what I wanted. It definitely wasn't in my best interest. So I was being selfish. I needed to silence my own intuition, repress my own knowing of what was right and wrong for me, and listen to these professionals, as they must know more than I do. And nowadays, the term general anxiety disorder, or having anxiety or panic attacks, is a very common mental health issue. In the early 80s, I had no idea what this was or the feelings and thoughts that I was having were from a place of anxiety. That realization would come like 20 years later when I was going through my social service work and Gestalt psychotherapy. It was an aha moment to connect to that anxiety and understand it, but it was also a big kick in the gut. Still, I don't blame being anxious on why the adoption happened. I understand it as one of the aspects present at the time, which I just simply didn't have awareness of. Okay. Here we go on to language. Illegitimate or bastard. Like, really? These are words we use. A concept I've never really understood. Okay, this is why we need to always be considering the era in which one comes of age, so to speak, of our clients, but also understanding history and the influences of such eras. Religious beliefs, I'll use Christianity for North American reference. However, the beliefs are not limited to one religion or culture. If a baby was born to an unwed young girl or woman, it was deemed a bastard or illegitimate. I always thought, how can anyone be illegitimate simply because their parents weren't married? Wow, seems crazy. But the rationale, besides, of course, being an immoral person, females, of course, in particular, for having sexual relations outside of marriage. Where was I here? Sorry. Yeah, for having sexual outside of marriage, the rationale is solely based on what was it for entitlement or inheritance of some sort. So a child born outside of marriage had no rights to inherit anything from their paternal lineage. So this really meant that women were incapable of knowing who their child's father was, or that they'd all claim the father was of some wealth or nobility in which the child could benefit. Okay. Creating illegitimacy freed every man to behave as sexually promiscuously as they desired, whether married or not, as the only children they'd be responsible for were the ones their wives gave birth to. So let's hear it for patriarchy. When there was only one gender and race really who made the laws and decisions, it certainly seems like they created what was in their best interest. I was well into my 30s before I realized that my mother-in-law and some of my husband's aunts and uncles actually had the word illegitimate like stamped onto their birth certificate. I had no idea that existed. Now, language within the adoption community is controversial, for sure. The term birth mother was coined arguably by Pearl S. Buck, an adoptive mother and author, in 1955 or thereabouts in the States. Now in Ontario, documented adoptions began in 1921 and the records were open for the first 2 years. So meaning all the adults were privy to the information. In 1923, a small group of adoptive parents petitioned the courts to seal the adoption records and they became closed, no access to any party directly involved. Only child welfare workers had the access. So if we fast forward 85 years to like 1998, it took a decade and 3 bills until adoption records in Ontario were open, unsealed in 2008. And I'm very proud to say that even with the disclosure veto, which we didn't want, Ontario still has the most progressive adoption disclosure law in all of North America. Something to be proud of. Okay, back to the term birth mother. As many of these mothers matured, found their footing, and began reuniting with their children, most of them felt like this gnawing discomfort with the handle they were given, as it did not reflect their experience of losing a child in this way. It felt like they were being trivialized or reduced to one act of giving birth. And, like they were incubators. So the term natural mother or first mother began to be used within the community. I know most would simply prefer mother, but the media and institutions never really caught on to this, and today birth mother is still predominantly used. I hope someday that will change. We could spend an afternoon on language, but I won't bore you with that. My point is that we need to allow each mother whatever term she desires, and to understand why birth mother, for many of us, limits our experience to just the event of the birth, right? Much more than that. It negates the trauma, loss, and grief of the experience of relinquishing one's child to adoption. So relinquishing or surrendering, more language to consider, as the phrases used in media, movies about the subject have always been the child was given up, given away for adoption. So given up, I get it. Maybe I'm being extra oversensitive. Well, what's the big deal here? But no little girl says to herself, oh, I can't wait to grow up and have a baby that I'll give up or give away to another couple, right? Clothes and furniture are things we give away. The words and phrases we use, especially when they are repeated in ways in which to describe or formulate a specific viewpoint of another, really matter. So what's critical to understand that the adoptee will feel abandonment. And unfortunately, no amount of unconditional love fixes this. And it's long overdue for us as a society and as professionals to fully connect to the fact that separating mother and child harms the child. Sure, the mother too, but if we really are caring about the children, we have to know this and to address this. Pretending that the primal wound doesn't exist or it's an archaic notion, and we now know better. Let's do better. In order for us as a society to allow mothers and their babies to be separated from each other, the mother has to be deemed a villain. She must be deemed unworthy of raising her children. How else would a progressive, empathetic, conscious society be okay with this? We have to believe things that are either just plain false or not entirely factual. We have to believe the biggest lie, which is that adoption serves the child's best interest and is in their own good. No. At this time in history, we must know that separating baby from mother will impact him negatively. We need to acknowledge and understand this fully in order to be able to relate, support, and have empathy for the adoptee experience. Now, if anyone wants to know anything about adoption, this is the book, okay? Nancy Verrier, I cannot recommend this book any highly. She is an adoptive mother who had a raised daughter and adopted daughter, and she saw the differences. She is also a clinical psychologist with a master's degree. I've heard many adoptees over the years call this book their Bible, that it really helped them to understand themselves. I truly believe this book could only have been written by an adoptive mother, as this dynamic is what gives the book its true authenticity. I don't believe if a natural mother or an adoptee had written the exact same book, it would be received the same, right? It needed to be a courageous adoptive mother. Yes, with a master's degree in psychology, that doesn't hurt. Why? Because otherwise adoptive parents or everyone else would believe that it simply would dismiss all the research and emotional trauma from the adoptee experience. So it kind of had to be written by an adoptive mother. And I really applaud her for having the fortitude to write this book. She saw and began to understand that there really is a difference in raising an adopted child. And instead of keeping silent about this, she dove in, spoke to dozens and dozens of willing volunteers within the adoption community to uncover what this social experiment, how it impacted them. It had to be written by an adoptive mother who did the research, really got it in order to be considered worthy for those who do not have a direct adoption experience. So from The Primal Wound, this is an excerpt from the book, I don't believe it is possible to sever the tie with the biological mother and replace her with another primary caregiver, no matter how warm, caring, and motivated she may be, without psychological consequences for the child and the mother. An infant or child can certainly attach to another caregiver, but the quality of that attachment may be different from that with the first mother, and bonding may be difficult, or, as many adoptees have told me, impossible. So with reunions, the research Nancy Verrier brings to the reunion process will be of great value. And the entire book, as I said, is truly phenomenal. I can speak from what I've observed within others' reunions and my own, but we really need at least one of the two parties to have done their work. And what I mean by that is, for starters, they need to acknowledge the grief and loss of each other, right? They have to get to that to start their healing process. Now, for a moment, let's look at this theory for every one of us outside of an adoption experience. One of my teachers is also a shaman at the Gestalt Institute. Would say to the class, our healing is about coming to terms with all of our losses. And this really resonated with me. In his book, How to Be an Adult, change this, by David Rico, our problem is not that as children our needs were unmet, but as adults they are still unmourned. Very important. Let me check my time here. What do I have? Because I had another excerpt from the book. about that. I really, really liked this saying. And from the book, it went on to say, sadly, at some point in one's life, it is necessary to face this truth and begin the mourning process. After many failed attempts, it becomes apparent that it is unreasonable for one to expect the adults, or even more so, the children in our lives, to make up for the primal needs of our childhood. Yet many people in relationships try over and over again to do just that. The result is that very few adults' relationships are mature relationships, right? So that can stand for all of us. So the natural response to loss is mourning. Everyone mourns in their own way. As we know from the stages of grief and Kubler-Ross, doesn't have to be on a linear path and experiencing more than one emotion at a time. Simultaneously, it can certainly happen, right? So this is for all of us without an adoption experience. With an adoption experience, we can now add these back to adoptees and moms. These are the 7 core issues we also need to be aware of in order to support the person through their process. Knowledge is power and empowering. As adults, we don't need anyone for survival. For the adult adoptee, the initial loss of the mother as an infant was still experienced as trauma. Because number 1, the only person they've ever known is now suddenly gone. And 2, for the baby, their survival is codependent, reliant on its mother. Recognizing these losses and potential core issues can initiate true grieving and healing, which is needed. If the grief is denied or avoided, it can become neurosis. Awareness of what they irretrievably lost and what they irreplaceably missed out on, and that those phases and aspects within early childhood are gone forever. So this is what's remarkably different for an adoptee. Their grief is compounded. Examples are their irretrievable memory, no memory of this, and their irreplaceable true heredity. The feeling and fear of abandonment and trusting others is what can be prevalent for those adopted. They can often feel like they don't belong in either family, adoptive or birth, even with loving, supportive parents on both sides. They can run into loyalty issues because almost without fail, if they start telling a friend or trusted cousin, I'm searching or I'm in reunion, the very first thing they'll be presented with, people will ask them, well, how do your adopted parents feel about that? Or how will they feel? Right? And that's more of a social conditioning around caretaking of the adoptive parents. Many adoptees are in touch with these emotions or beliefs about self, and many are not. I've heard the term used in the cloud, meaning when they've not done any of their deep dives or their work. And this is not to be judgmental or critical. An adoptee's interpersonal work is really not for the faint of heart, mothers as well. I've also heard the term in the weirdness, in which to describe feeling like they just don't fit in either family dynamic. If neither party has done any of their own personal healing, the reunion is certainly more vulnerable. We've got 2 people with unresolved grief, possibly consciously or unconsciously, trying to be healed by the other, and then add individual personalities, unfinished business from one's lives. It's an emotional journey, and the way out is through. So we must agree to go through whatever becomes present, work through it, have adult communications. Yes, it's crucial to feel one's emotions. And for the moms, I ask them to consider just being aware of their feelings and thoughts and which ones are for therapy and which ones are appropriate to share, at least initially. We just don't want to saddle our baggage onto our kids is all I'm trying to say. We are the elders and we really need to embrace this role. How? Unconditional love. That's it. Of course, healthy relationships of any kind always require truth. So always answer questions truthfully, being vulnerable, expressing oneself with care and esteem for one another. If we have requests or desires for the relationship, we need to communicate them. And then remember, the other always gets to say, yes, no, I can, or I can't, right? For the mother, she must forgive her younger self, and this can be very tricky to do because of all the underlying circumstances which led to the adoption that she likely had little or no control over. She was also never provided the truth about how adoption would impact herself and her baby for the rest of their lives. It was solely presented as beneficial, only for the baby. And as for her, the sage advice was, you just move on with your life. Now, for anyone who has children, does that statement even seem rational in any era? No, it's an absurd notion. The past 20 years, I've always sort of felt like the middle child in the adoption community, as most of the moms are from the punitive, righteous, religious baby scoop era, and their experiences were more deeply rooted in shame and secrecy, right? There were a few mothers I met that were younger than myself that had some open adoptions. Then they were extremely challenging because the agreed upon terms for visiting or access, they're not enforced by any governing body. So there was one case where there was an agreement to an open adoption, and as soon as the adoption was finalized, the adopted parents moved to another province. There's no recourse for the natural mother, like none. So for me, giving birth in 1982, the professionals had developed a new course of action, which was opposite of condemning and unsupportive. It now became under the guise of the caretaking, which I've spoke of throughout. To be honest, I'm really unsure which is more insidious, right? One uses vinegar, one uses sugar, but they're both after the same thing, which is the baby. They both lack integrity, compassion, support, and factual knowledge of what is actually in a baby's best interest, which is to be with their mother. Now, this is not always possible for a myriad of deeply sad and troubling reasons, but we also have to remember adoption is a billion with a B, $1 billion business in North America. For a natural mother to heal, it's my belief she has to take responsibility in the present, even when she has had no choice in the adoption. I mean this truly with love and support from my healing journey. This can also support her child in the reunion process and set the mother free from what was to what is now, here and now in the present, regarding her influence on the reunion. I had a therapy session that healed me really from this. And it was hard, but the therapist had me say out loud, I placed my son for adoption. I still feel a little niggly when I feel that. She had me say it several times. I was bawling, I was angry. I wanted to remind her, look at all the manipulation and the circumstances. All those aspects were true and valid. The mothers were indeed victims, as were our babies. But somehow when she had me embody this and allow my heart to break and feel that pain, that is what freed me. She did me the best service. And owning this and then giving compassion and forgiveness to myself for trusting professionals instead of my own intuition and believing that I could be replaced by financial resources. It's such BS. Forgiveness and compassion for self is mandatory for all of us, right? My open festering wound became a scar that very day, and it changed my life by shifting my perspective of my trauma. My scar will always be there, and I embrace it. My experiences have led me to be able to support members of the adoption community and evoke professionals to do the same by understanding the issues an adoptee or first mother can be contending with. Yeah. For any population we work with, isn't it time now to leave behind judgments, criticism, racism, misogyny, shaming, and I could go on. What inspires us as humans is hope, love, compassion, and being validated simply for who we are, warts and all. Reunions are going to be emotional and tricky, and there will be bumps and hurdles. I've only touched the tip of the iceberg here, and I know this. We've not even spoken about transracial adoptions and the identity issues being even more compounded. Again, we really need to ditch the belief that cultural genetics do not matter, because they do. This is within each and every one of us. In conclusion, early on in my search for my son, it became all-consuming. I was white-knuckling the journey, obsessed with finding him. It was not a healthy place for me to be stuck, so I knew I had to engage in some serious soul searching. I needed to fully let go, body, mind, and soul, before I could receive. I changed the frantic, desperate energy of not knowing into a relaxed, open space of positive energy and acceptance of never knowing. I had been fighting and resisting what actually was in the present when I didn't know. I was fighting that because I wanted to know. I didn't know him. When I fully accepted this, it was very soon after that we connected. And that happened for my workshop partner as well when he let go. It may seem like an airy-fairy thing to some, but honestly, if there's one lesson I've learned in my entire life of experiences, is that letting go of any and all negative ways in which we think about ourselves, about others, or the potential for the future, anything that is unsupportive or feels oppressive, we simply have to let go. We only have right now. Being present with a fully open mind to the possibilities is what I would deem holistic health. I'm not saying it's a flip of a switch, but I do believe anyone can create this by knowing oneself, having awareness of one's thoughts and feelings, and living in the present moment, not in the past, which cannot be changed except for our perception of it, or nor the future, which is still to be determined to varying degrees. How you treat yourself and how you treat others in the present. How do you first give and provide for yourself? Compassion, love, confidence, self-esteem. Well, that's through self-care, whatever that looks like for you. I want to thank you all very much. I hope you found this presentation informative, and I'm sorry for some of the little tiny glitches. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I want to take this opportunity, as I noted, that we have a bit of a time now to have some questions. So if we want to put some questions into the chat, I'm going to try to read those for Leslie. Leslie, as the questions are coming in, I'm also going to ask you to just highlight the two books that you mentioned, just so that the individuals on the chat, I know there were some questions about the two books. So there was Primal Wound.
Yes, The Primal Wound, Understanding the Adopted Child by Nancy Verrier. That everyone should read. And the other one was just something that was from within her book. I haven't read that one, but it's David, it's either Rico or Richo, David Richo. And his book is called How to Be an Adult.
Excellent. Thank you. And for all the participants, Leslie will be logging on later as well into the portal, and she can review some of the sharing that's been happening. Leslie, I think I took a lot from it. Many of the participants have posted their own comments and thoughts on your presentation as well. It'd be very beneficial to look through. Okay. I have one question here from Jacqueline. What about the birth mother who hasn't done her work and who doesn't feel comfortable discussing it with the birth child? And she has a second part, and the adoptee who doesn't want to put more of a burden on the birth mom who she knows is feeling a longstanding guilt.
Right. So I'm not sure what the question is. What about like, what do they do about that? Or
Jacqueline, if you want to put in a few more commentary. It was during your presentation, so I think it's contextual to when you were sharing about the guilt of the birth mother, but I'll also wait to see if Jacqueline comments further, just so I.
If you want to read it again, I'll see if I can, if I'm missing something, if you want to clarify, Danita.
Sure. So again, it's what about the birth mother who hasn't done her work and who doesn't feel comfortable discussing it with the birth child,
right?
And the adoptee who doesn't want to put more of a burden on the birth mom who she knows is feeling longstanding guilt. And I think it's just around the context of reaching out and reinitiating the relationship after the fact.
Oh, right. So those are things to be worked through, because what they're doing is then they're putting what they may desire onto somebody else or vice versa. That's what that sounds like to me. So again, a good therapist can help them just uncover what that's about for them. So if we feel we're going to trigger someone else, then we're almost becoming responsible for how they feel, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
So a good therapist would help them process that. They may decide to be in reunion or not. Like, this is an individual choice. I know it can be healing for most, but it's not for everybody. You know, I'm not pushing the full agenda that everybody needs to do this. No, but it can be very helpful in healing to most.
and I just have follow up from Jacqueline. Yes, it's my own situation. I'm adopted and I don't know how to approach her. I would like to talk more, but I don't want to disturb her because she avoids unpleasant things. So,
Well, I can give her my phone number and she can talk to me live.
so there you go.
I'm
Thank you.
happy to converse with her. This is what I do.
Thank you so much, Leslie. The next question I have is just if you have an opinion or point of view, your thoughts on surrogacy.
Surrogacy. So it depends what. My whole platform is around truth and honesty. So however you create a child, we have a situation in the family that's kind of very tricky, where it was another person's egg, another person's sperm put into someone. So they're not genetically matched to who gave birth to them at all, right? And it seems like this person in our family isn't quite sure how to tell them this. Like, sometimes they'll say, well, your grandfather might be your father. And I think, ick, right? I just always think we have to be honest. Age appropriate, yes. But when people have the facts, they can live with that. It may be painful, it may be hurtful, but they can live with the facts. It's when there's secrets and then those secrets come out, that just compounds more pain. So that's what my thing is. Let's be honest.
Thank you. I see your point that's so very true. The transparency helps.
Yes.
I have another question for you. I'm going to just read it out. I have always believed that adoption should be of the mother and the baby rather than taking away the baby from the mother. Do you think there's still a place for traditional adoption as we have known it in the past?
I've done a lot of soul searching and work on this, and I don't support adoption the way it is. And I can proudly say that because I've done 20 years of work within myself to get to this point, really done a lot of work, even joined the ACO, which was a promoting adoption thing, because I thought, am I crazy for what I think and feel? Because everyone else seems to think adoption is great. But I've come to my own conclusions because of my own experience primarily. And because I see what it does to people, right? We think of, we give an infertile couple, let's say, a baby, and isn't that good? That's what the focus is. But the other two are kind of forgotten about. And it's like, no, we're human. We have feelings. We exist too. And we need to shine a light on the impact this has on us, if that makes some sense.
Absolutely.
I probably answered that well.
No, thank you. My next question is this is a personal experience, been the question in there from one of the participants. My niece was adopted and she's going to be 18 years old in May of 2022. She has always known about her adoption. We adopted her at 1 day old. My question is, do you have any resources about reunions with the mother?
The primal wound.
Sorry?
Primal wound.
Primal wound. So yeah. That's...
And everyone will love how it's laid out. It's not like reading a novel. She's got sections and chapters addressing all the stuff that can come up. To my knowledge, she's done a phenomenal job. And I don't know why this book isn't like on every corner, but it's phenomenal. She's done her work. And as I mentioned in the presentation, it had to be done by an adoptive mother in order for it to be taken seriously. I believe that.
Right. And the perspective is so unique.
Right.
My next question is, individual says here, I have two best friends, one adopted as an infant, and the other was a mother forced to surrender her baby at 16. How can I support both of these women, validate their unique grief?
Just by listening to them, being available to listen and see what's coming up. You don't always have to have the answers. People just want to be validated and know that their feelings are important and matter and are real, and people get them, right? It's when we say, just go on with your life after you've given birth. It's a ludicrous idea, right? So we have to validate what people feel and think. That's how you can be the best support. Or be open, have questions, right? What do you actually want to ask them about their feelings and thoughts?
It's very good points, validating and being open to the discussion and to just kind of lean into the conversation with the individual.
Yeah, don't worry about having to have the answers or fixing, right? We always want to go to solution. Let's fix it. When really it's more this middle area as opposed to, oh, here's the problem, let's solve it. It's really in the middle where that solution can be formulated by listening and validating, supporting.
It's almost as if it's a dance, isn't it, Leslie? Like you're going into it not quite knowing where you're going to end up, but the fact that you're participating kind of allows us to get there.
Bang on, exactly. Yeah, being open to the process.
That's right. Thank you. That's great. I have a question here that says, can you share your experience about attachment? Sorry, my chat moved. Can you share your experience about attachment styles of adoptees? And I'll just read the further piece of it. I'm adopted. My birth mother used all throughout my pregnancy. My adopted father is an alcoholic, and I'm now in recovery myself, not just in recovery from addictions, but my attachment style in my adulthood with intimacy with partners and relationships in general.
Yeah, so I'd have to go back to my literature and all that to refresh myself on that. But I know codependence is a big one. That's probably number one. So I'm sure they probably experienced something around that. And then it's almost like a come here, go away, come here, go away. Like building trust can be very difficult for many adoptees because of who they are as a person, because of their circumstances from birth and their lineage, their genes, but also whatever happened in the adoptive home. That's why I say nature and nurture are equal to me. I don't see one as being better or worse. They're equal, right? They're required. That's what each of us has, whether adopted or not. We have our who we are as our genes and the environment we were in. So they're both important. And then how the person views self. That's why I ended the way I ended. And I really wanted to say to everyone, no matter what they're going through, these are some strategies or ways in which we can help heal ourselves. We first got to give that love and compassion to ourselves.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm just looking at the time, and I have one in here. It's more of a statement, I think, and I'll just read it to you. There's an incredible amount of judgment around teenage pregnancy and systemic pressure of inadequacy. The message is generally that you're defective. And I think it's shocking to me as we kind of move through, although in some ways, as you said, there's shows, we're getting into a better place. There's still that judgment that follows. And when you think about sort of the future state and if we're moving in the right direction, can you tell us the way in which we should be moving, where we should be, and how to move people into that better state of mind?
Right. So it's always been put on the mother, on the female, right? The females get all this, even in that statement from that doctor. Yes, it was in the 50s. It's a million years ago now for most, but that the father has no responsibility. Even now, Danita, when we go to get, if you're going to searching and reunion in reunion, or you're going to get your original birth certificate, I'll just call it that. It's called something else, but your birth certificate, if you send away for that, so you can get all the information. The father's names are still blacked out. So even though I was with his father, he signed the birth certificate because we weren't married. He's
not responsible.
Because I could say it's anybody, right? So that has to shift. That has to shift, where the father has to have some accountability. I'm not talking financial for this, but for the adoptee to be able to see, well, who was stated as my father? That's still blacked out.
It's a very good point. Moving into a future where both the woman and the man are coming into it as an equal partnership really is.
Yeah, removing the judgment, the stigma, all that stuff. Why? It's a religious undertone, really.
Right.
And it's not, whatever religion, that's not a place of lovingness or care or support. That's judgment, condemnation, criticism. If I don't believe any God is that way.
And I think just
yeah,
speaking through these allows us to just really reevaluate some of our assumptions and how we got there, and exposes them where we wouldn't have really seen them before. And I think that's helpful. I see the time, and there are a few more commentary, and Leslie, you'll take some time to go through the portal as well.
Right. So I'll just go,
I'll guide you through that. I just want to thank all the participants. So there was so much sharing in the chat, and I feel humbled to have read a lot of these experiences. And Leslie, as I said before, you'll take a lot out of it, I'm sure yourself. And that this really just does actually conclude this educational session. And I really want to thank you, Leslie. This was a very powerful presentation. You know, I feel fortunate to have moderated in this, and you know, you've given me a lot to think about. I can only imagine for those of us on the line and in the field, this is so useful, and changes your mindset when you're out working and interacting. You know, and it brings that awareness right to the forefront. So I thank you so much for that. On behalf of the college, I'd like to present Leslie with a token of our appreciation. The college has made a donation to the Gord Downey Chani Wenjack Fund, which aims to build cultural understanding and create a path towards reconciliation between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous people.
Thank you. Thank you. That's fantastic. That's great. Good. Yeah.
Thank you, Leslie. And for all of you on this session, as a general reminder about this year's AMED, if there's any sessions that you're unable to attend, again, remember that these will be accessible on demand for you to view. I'd also like to remind all attendees that you'll receive an email in the next few days asking you to complete a post-event feedback. Once you complete the feedback form, you'll have access to the link for the certificate of participation, which you can fill out and print for your records. We're going to take a short break now, and I'd ask you to please make your way to the next education session that you've selected, which will begin promptly at 2:45. And I'll take another opportunity to thank Leslie. Thank you so much. This forum is different, and you know, you've made it a great success.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, everyone.